For a long time, I've paid attention to how people talk about debt. Not in classrooms, not in textbooks, but in quiet conversations, late at night, when no one is trying to sound smart. And what I noticed wasn't a disagreement. It was confusion. Some people feared debt so deeply that they avoided it at all costs. Others embraced it recklessly, believing it was the fastest way forward. Both groups were convinced they were right, and yet, over time, many of them ended up in the same place. Stressed, constrained, still feeling behind. What surprised me wasn't who borrowed money and who didn't. It was something much subtler. The people who struggled the most weren't always the ones with the most debt. And the people who stayed calm, stable, and quietly grew wealth weren't always debt-free. That contradiction stayed with me. Because if debt itself were the problem, the outcome would be simple. Avoid it and you're safe. Use it and you're doomed. But reality doesn't work that way. It never has. Over time, a different pattern became impossible to ignore. Debt didn't behave like a moral issue. It didn't reward caution, and it didn't punish boldness. It behaved like a force. Neutral. Amplifying. In some hands, it quietly multiplied progress. In others, it accelerated collapse. The same tool. Radically different outcomes. That's when it became clear to me. Most conversations about debt are happening at the wrong level. People argue about interest rates, about good debt versus bad debt, about timing and opportunity, but almost no one talks about the structure underneath, the invisible framework that determines whether debt works for you or against you. There are rules at play, not opinions, not strategies. Rules. They don't care how confident you feel. They don't respond to optimism or fear. They don't bend because someone needs things to work out. They function the same way gravity does, ignored by many, respected by few, unforgiving to everyone. What makes this especially dangerous is that these rules are rarely taught explicitly. Most people learn about debt through emotion, through warnings, through stories of disaster, or promises of speed. Very few are taught how debt actually behaves once it enters a system, how it interacts with time, with cash flow, with human behavior. And when rules aren't understood, people don't just make mistakes, they repeat them, confidently. This audiobook exists because of that gap. Not to convince you to borrow, and not to convince you to avoid borrowing, but to help you see debt differently, as something that responds to structure, not intention, to design, not desire. Throughout this audiobook, we won't focus on tactics, we won't chase shortcuts, and we won't glorify speed. Instead, we'll examine the hidden rules that govern how debt actually works in the real world, why it serves some people faithfully for decades, while trapping others almost immediately, and why the difference is rarely intelligence, luck, or courage. It's structure. As you listen, you may notice moments of discomfort. That's normal. When deeply held assumptions are questioned, the mind resists before it understands. There's no need to agree with everything you hear, but there is value in observing it carefully. Because once you see how these rules operate, you can't unsee them, and debt stops feeling mysterious, or dangerous, or magical. It becomes predictable, and predictability is where control begins. This is not a guide on how to borrow. It's an invitation to understand the system beneath borrowing, the part most people never see, and once you see it, everything else changes. That is where we begin. For a long time, I've paid attention to how people talk about debt, not in classrooms, not in textbooks, but in quiet conversations, late at night, when no one is trying to sound smart. And what I noticed wasn't a disagreement. It was confusion. Some people feared debt so deeply that they avoided it at all costs. Others embraced it recklessly, believing it was the fastest way forward. Both groups were convinced they were right, and yet, over time, Many of them ended up in the same place, stressed, constrained, still feeling behind. What surprised me wasn't who borrowed money and who didn't. It was something much subtler. The people who struggled the most weren't always the ones with the most debt, and the people who stayed calm, stable, and quietly grew wealth weren't always debt-free. That contradiction stayed with me. Because if debt itself were the problem, the outcome would be simple. Avoid it and you're safe. Use it and you're doomed. But reality doesn't work that way. It never has. Over time, a different pattern became impossible to ignore. Debt didn't behave like a moral issue. It didn't reward caution, and it didn't punish boldness. It behaved like a force. Neutral. Amplifying. In some hands, it quietly multiplied progress. In others, it accelerated collapse. The same tool. Radically different outcomes. That's when it became clear to me. Most conversations about debt are happening at the wrong level. People argue about interest rates, about good debt versus bad debt, about timing and opportunity, but almost no one talks about the structure underneath, the invisible framework that determines whether debt works for you or against you. There are rules at play, not opinions, not strategies. Rules. They don't care how confident you feel. They don't respond to optimism or fear. They don't bend because someone needs things to work out. They function the same way gravity does, ignored by many, respected by few, unforgiving to everyone. What makes this especially dangerous is that these rules are rarely taught explicitly. Most people learn about debt through emotion, through warnings, through stories of disaster, or promises of speed. Very few are taught how debt actually behaves once it enters a system, how it interacts with time, with cash flow, with human behavior. And when rules aren't understood, people don't just make mistakes, they repeat them, confidently. This audiobook exists because of that gap. Not to convince you to borrow, and not to convince you to avoid borrowing, but to help you see debt differently, as something that responds to structure, not intention, to design, not desire. Throughout this audiobook, we won't focus on tactics, we won't chase shortcuts, and we won't glorify speed. Instead, we'll examine the hidden rules that govern how debt actually works in the real world, why it serves some people faithfully for decades, while trapping others almost immediately, and why the difference is rarely intelligence, luck, or courage. It's structure. As you listen, you may notice moments of discomfort. That's normal. When deeply held assumptions are questioned, the mind resists before it understands. There's no need to agree with everything you hear, but there is value in observing it carefully. Because once you see how these rules operate, you can't unsee them, and debt stops feeling mysterious, or dangerous, or magical. It becomes predictable, and predictability is where control begins. This is not a guide on how to borrow. It's an invitation to understand the system beneath borrowing, the part most people never see, and once you see it, everything else changes. That is where we begin. Chapter 1. Why most people fear debt and still lose to it. Most people were taught to fear debt, not to question it, not to understand it, but to avoid it. Debt was framed as danger, as failure, as something that ruins lives if you get too close. So a simple belief took root early on. If you stay away from debt, you will be safe. That belief feels responsible. It feels mature. It feels like common sense. And yet, quietly, it leads many people into a different kind of loss. Because fear does not create understanding, it creates distance. When people fear debt, they don't study how it behaves. They don't observe its patterns. They don't learn the conditions under which it helps or harms. They simply avoid it. At first, this seems harmless, even wise. But over time, avoidance creates a blind spot. People who avoid debt entirely often find themselves moving very slowly, not failing dramatically, just not progressing. Their income depends almost entirely on time. Opportunities feel limited by savings. Growth feels like something reserved for others. They work harder, they wait longer, they stay cautious, and slowly they confuse safety with stability. Avoiding debt does not remove its influence from your life. It only removes your ability to control how it affects you. Because debt is not something that exists in isolation. The companies people work for use it. The housing markets people live in depend on it. The systems that shape modern economies are built on it. So when someone avoids understanding debt, they don't escape it. They simply remain subject to decisions made by those who do understand it. This is one way people lose, quietly. But there is another way. Some people don't fear debt at all. They see it as opportunity, as leverage, as a way to move faster than their income would normally allow. They borrow confidently, sometimes eagerly. They believe debt is the solution to being stuck, and so they take it on without structure, without margin, without a system designed to absorb pressure. At first, it feels empowering. Movement replaces waiting. Action replaces hesitation. But when conditions change, as they always do, the lack of structure is exposed. Small mistakes become expensive. Temporary setbacks become permanent stress. Cash flow tightens. Options disappear. Debt, in this case, does not create growth. It accelerates fragility. What matters here is not which group is right or wrong. Both groups are reacting emotionally. One reacts with fear, the other reacts with optimism. Neither is operating from understanding. This leads to the first rule most people never hear. Debt does not respond to emotion. It responds to structure. Fear does not protect you from it. Confidence does not tame it. Debt simply magnifies what already exists. If there is no structure, it magnifies chaos. If there is weak structure, it magnifies risk. If there is strong structure, it magnifies stability. This is why debt has such a confusing reputation. Some people say it destroyed their lives. Others say it made everything possible. But debt did neither. Debt only revealed the quality of the system it entered. Most people never reach this realization because they frame debt as a choice between extremes. Either avoid it completely and stay safe, or use it aggressively and hope for growth. This false choice keeps people stuck. Because debt is not a shortcut, and it is not a trap. It is a force. And like any force, it behaves according to rules. It does not reward bravery. It does not punish caution. It does not care about intentions. It only responds to design. This is where fear quietly becomes expensive. When people fear debt, they don't build systems. They rely on income. They trade time for money. They cap their own upside without realizing it. Over time, safety becomes a ceiling, and ceilings feel comfortable until you realize they never move. On the other side, those who rush into debt without understanding face a different cost. They mistake speed for progress. They confuse movement with direction. They borrow before designing stability. They expand before creating margin. They depend on things going right. Debt, in these cases, does not forgive mistakes. It amplifies them. This is why debt exposes people. It doesn't change who you are. It reveals how you operate under pressure. It shows whether decisions are reactive or intentional, whether systems exist or hope does the work. Most people never learn this because they stop at fear. They hear warnings, they see failures, and they assume avoidance equals intelligence. But intelligence is not avoiding powerful tools. Intelligence is understanding how they behave. Fire can destroy, but avoiding fire entirely means never building anything. Debt is no different. Until this point, most people have been taught only two messages: stay away from debt, or use debt to move faster. Neither teaches control. Control begins when emotion is removed from the equation, when debt is no longer feared and no longer glorified, but observed. In the next chapter, debt will be redefined. Not as a solution, not as a problem, but as what it actually is. A tool. And like all tools, it serves only those who understand the rules that govern it. Chapter 2. Debt is a tool, not a strategy. One of the most dangerous misunderstandings about debt is the belief that it can replace thinking. Many people treat debt as if it were a plan. They borrow first and hope clarity appears later. But debt has never been a strategy. It has only ever been a tool. And tools do not decide outcomes. They only magnify the intent and structure behind them. A hammer can build a house. The same hammer can destroy one. The difference is never the hammer. Debt works the same way. When people say debt worked for them, they are usually pointing at the outcome, not the process underneath. What they rarely notice is that debt did nothing on its own. It did not create value. It did not generate direction. It did not solve uncertainty. It simply accelerated whatever system was already in place. This is where most people go wrong. They look at debt and ask the wrong question. They ask, how much can I borrow? Instead of, what does this borrowing connect to? Because borrowing without a system is not leverage, it is exposure. Debt becomes dangerous the moment it is asked to do a job it was never designed to do. Debt cannot create discipline. Debt cannot create cash flow. Debt cannot create stability. And yet, people expect it to. They borrow, hoping debt will fix a weak income. They borrow, hoping it will compensate for poor structure. They borrow, hoping it will buy time while no system is actually being built. In these cases, debt is being used as a substitute for design, and substitutes always fail. A strategy answers the question of direction. A tool only increases force. If there is no clear direction, more force simply creates faster mistakes. This is why people who rely on debt as a strategy often feel busy but unstable. Things are moving, but nothing feels solid. Payments exist, but ownership does not. Obligations grow, but control does not. Debt, when misused, creates motion without progress. This is also why some people swear debt ruined their lives. Not because debt is inherently destructive, but because it was asked to perform a role it cannot fulfill. Debt does not choose where you are going. It only affects how fast you get there, and if the destination is unclear, speed becomes a liability. The wealthy understand this distinction clearly. They never confuse tools with plans. They do not borrow to figure things out. They do not borrow to feel productive. They do not borrow to escape discomfort. Debt enters only after direction is already defined. The system comes first. The structure comes first. The margins come first. Debt is added last. This order is everything. Because when debt is added to a well-designed system, it does not create pressure. It distributes it. It does not create dependence. It creates efficiency. It does not demand perfect conditions. It tolerates imperfection. But when debt is added to confusion, it magnifies stress. When it is added to weak discipline, it magnifies volatility. When it is added to hope, it magnifies disappointment. Debt has no opinion about you. It has no loyalty. It does not adapt. It simply follows structure. This is why the same loan can feel empowering to one person and suffocating to another. The difference is not intelligence. It is not courage. And it is not luck. It is whether debt is supporting a strategy or pretending to be one. Until this distinction is understood, debt will always feel unpredictable. Sometimes helpful, sometimes destructive, never trustworthy. But once debt is placed back into its proper role, something changes. It loses its mystery. It stops being a promise, and it stops being a threat. It becomes what it always was: a neutral instrument. In the next chapter, we will look at why debt does not reward intelligence and why smart people are often the ones most damaged by it. Because debt does not amplify how smart you are. It amplifies how you behave. Chapter 3. Loans amplify behavior, not intelligence. One of the most comforting beliefs people hold about money is that intelligence protects them. They believe that if they are smart enough, educated enough, or informed enough, debt will somehow behave differently for them. It won't. Loans do not respond to intelligence. They respond to behavior. This is why some of the most intelligent people experience the most damaging outcomes with debt. Not because they lack knowledge, but because debt magnifies habits, not ideas. Debt does not care how well you understand finance. It does not care how well you can explain a model. It does not care how confident you sound. What it cares about is what you do consistently, how you react under pressure, how you make decisions when conditions shift, how you behave when results are delayed. Loans amplify patterns. If someone tends to rush decisions, debt increases the cost of rushing. If someone avoids uncomfortable truths, debt removes the ability to ignore them. If someone depends on optimism, debt tests that optimism relentlessly. This is why intelligence alone is never enough. Smart people often trust their ability to adapt. They believe they can figure it out later. They rely on flexibility instead of structure, and flexibility feels powerful until leverage is involved, because leverage reduces forgiveness. When there is no debt, small mistakes can be absorbed. Time can repair them, income can smooth them out. But once loans enter the picture, the margin for error shrinks. Mistakes don't just happen, they compound. Delays become obligations, assumptions become pressure, confidence becomes exposure. This is not because debt is cruel. It is because debt is precise. It reveals behavior without distortion. People often ask why two individuals can take similar loans and experience completely different outcomes. One remains calm, the other becomes overwhelmed. The difference is not what they know, it is how they operate. One has predictable routines, clear boundaries, built-in buffers. The other relies on reacting well, on improvisation, on things going mostly right. Debt rewards predictability, it punishes reactivity. This is why discipline matters more than brilliance once leverage is involved. Discipline creates rhythm. Rhythm creates reliability. Reliability creates survival. Without these, intelligence becomes a liability. Because smart people are often better at rationalizing bad decisions. They can explain why something should work. They can justify delays. They can convince themselves that risk is temporary. Debt does not listen to explanations. It listens only to cash flow, timing, and consistency. This is where many intelligent people are caught off guard. They assume understanding is control, but understanding without structure is fragile. Debt does not amplify insight. It amplifies execution. If execution is inconsistent, debt magnifies stress. If execution is stable, debt magnifies progress. This is the quiet truth few talk about. Loans expose temperament. They show whether someone can remain patient when results are slow. They show whether someone can remain disciplined when pressure increases. They show whether someone built buffers or depended on timing. In this sense, debt is not financial, it is behavioral. It tests emotional regulation, decision-making under uncertainty, the ability to operate without immediate reward. This is why two people with identical knowledge can experience opposite results. One uses debt as reinforcement, the other experiences it as strain. Debt does not create these differences, it reveals them. Once this is understood, the conversation around debt changes. The focus shifts away from being smart enough and toward being stable enough, because stability is what leverage needs. In the next chapter, we will draw a clear line between two very different uses of debt. One that quietly drains the future, and one that is designed to support it. Understanding this distinction is where control truly begins. Chapter 3. Loans. Amplify behavior, not intelligence. Bo Sung. One of the hardest truths to accept about debt is that it removes excuses. When loans are involved, outcomes become harder to blame on circumstance. There is less room to say, "This was unexpected," or "No one could have predicted this." Debt makes patterns visible. It exposes how decisions are made when comfort disappears. This is why intelligence alone often becomes a disadvantage. Highly intelligent people tend to trust their ability to reason their way out of trouble. They believe complexity can be managed later. They believe adaptation will save them. But debt does not allow endless adaptation. It demands consistency. Loans introduce fixed timelines, fixed obligations, fixed consequences, and fixed structures clash with flexible personalities. Behavior that is manageable without debt becomes destructive with it. Procrastination becomes costly. Overconfidence becomes exposure. Emotional decision-making becomes irreversible. Debt does not wait for insight. It does not care when clarity arrives. It operates on schedule. This is why behavior matters more than ideas. Someone with average intelligence but stable habits will outperform a brilliant person with inconsistent behavior once leverage is introduced. Consistency compounds. Brilliance fluctuates. Debt magnifies this difference relentlessly. It rewards those who show up the same way, regardless of mood or circumstance. It punishes those who depend on motivation, creativity, or last-minute problem solving. This is not because creativity lacks value. It is because debt demands predictability. People often assume they can become disciplined later. That discipline will appear once things get serious. Debt does not wait for that transition. It tests behavior immediately. This is why many people feel shocked when debt becomes stressful. Not because the math changed, but because their habits were never designed for pressure. Debt strips away flexibility, and what remains is how someone actually operates. This exposure is uncomfortable, but it is honest. Loans reveal whether someone plans in advance or reacts in real time, whether they build buffers or depend on timing, whether they can tolerate boredom or need constant stimulation. These traits exist long before debt appears. Debt simply turns up the volume. This is why loans feel unforgiving. They are not harsh, they are precise. They make invisible tendencies visible. Once this is understood, the conversation around intelligence changes. The goal is no longer to be clever. It is to be steady, because steadiness survives leverage. And anything that does not survive leverage was never stable to begin with. Chapter 4. The real difference between consumer debt and strategic leverage. Most people think the difference between good debt and bad debt is about categories. They separate loans by labels. Credit cards, mortgages, business loans, student loans. They assume the name determines the outcome. It doesn't. The real difference is not what the debt is called. It's what the debt is designed to do. Consumer debt is built around consumption. It pulls value forward from the future to satisfy the present. Strategic leverage is built around structure. It uses time deliberately to support a system that already exists. The mistake most people make is confusing appearance with function. Two loans can look identical on paper. Same amount, same interest rate, same repayment term. Yet one quietly drains the future, while the other supports long-term stability. The difference is intention translated into structure. Consumer debt answers emotional needs: comfort, status, relief, convenience. It solves how something feels now by borrowing from later. And because it is emotion-driven, it requires constant income to survive. Miss that income, and pressure appears immediately. Strategic leverage works in the opposite direction. It is indifferent to comfort. It is not interested in appearances. It is focused on function. It exists to strengthen a system that can operate without constant human input. This is a critical distinction. Consumer debt assumes you will always be there, always earning, always available, always able to respond. Strategic leverage assumes you will not. It plans for absence, for delays, for volatility. It does not depend on perfect behavior. It depends on design. This is why consumer debt creates anxiety and strategic leverage creates calm. One requires constant attention, the other reduces it. One narrows options over time, the other expands them. Most people never see this difference because both forms of debt feel the same at the beginning. Money arrives, movement begins, things appear to improve. But what happens next is where the truth shows itself. Consumer debt slowly increases dependency. More income is required just to stand still. Flexibility disappears quietly. Strategic leverage does the opposite. It aims to reduce dependence on personal effort. It creates breathing room. It adds resilience. This is why the wealthy rarely talk about debt in moral terms. They don't ask whether debt is good or bad. They ask whether it strengthens or weakens structure. If it increases fragility, it is rejected. If it improves durability, it is considered. This evaluation is unemotional. No excitement, no urgency, no pressure to act. Debt that requires constant personal involvement is avoided. Debt that allows systems to operate independently is respected. This distinction also explains why many people believe they are using debt strategically when they are not. If repayment depends entirely on their continued effort, the debt is not leverage, it is obligation. Leverage exists only when effort can step back and the system continues. Anything else is simply borrowing. This is not a judgment. It is a definition. Consumer debt converts future time into present relief. Strategic leverage converts present structure into future stability. They move in opposite directions, and confusing them is costly, because once consumer debt accumulates, it creates pressure to make short-term decisions. Pressure reduces patience. Reduced patience leads to mistakes. Strategic leverage does not push decisions forward, it slows them down. It allows choices to be made deliberately, not reactively. This is why the wealthy often appear conservative, even when using debt. They are not chasing speed. They are protecting structure. In the next chapter, we will look at the order in which the wealthy think about borrowing. Not how much they can borrow, but when borrowing becomes appropriate. Because timing, not access, is where most people go wrong. One of the most misleading aspects of debt is that consumer debt and strategic leverage often look identical at the beginning. Both deliver money. Both create movement. Both feel empowering in the moment. But what they demand afterward is completely different. Consumer debt requires maintenance. It needs constant input to justify its existence. More income, more effort, more attention. If that input slows, pressure appears immediately. Strategic leverage does not ask for maintenance. It asks for alignment. It is designed to function as long as the system beneath it continues operating. This is a crucial distinction. Consumer debt is fragile because it assumes conditions will remain favorable. Strategic leverage assumes disruption. It is built with the expectation that things will go wrong. This expectation shapes everything. Consumer debt optimizes for comfort now. Strategic leverage optimizes for resilience later. One borrows against desire. The other borrows against durability. This is why consumer debt feels urgent. There's always something to manage, something to adjust, something to worry about. Strategic leverage feels distant. It does not demand daily involvement. It does not react to emotion. It does not care about short-term outcomes. Its purpose is not to improve lifestyle. It is to stabilize systems. Most people confuse the two because they evaluate debt emotionally. They ask how borrowing will make life feel. The wealthy evaluate debt structurally. They ask how borrowing will behave when conditions change. If debt increases sensitivity to disruption, it is rejected. If it reduces sensitivity, it is considered. This evaluation is unemotional. No excitement, no fear, only structure. This is why the wealthy rarely regret their use of debt. Not because outcomes are always positive, but because exposure was controlled from the beginning. Consumer debt exposes the individual. Strategic leverage protects the individual by transferring responsibility to the system. This transfer is the defining feature. If you are required to perform continuously for debt to survive, it is consumer debt. If the system can function without you, it begins to resemble leverage. This difference determines everything that follows. Stress, freedom, longevity. Debt does not need to be eliminated to stop being dangerous. It only needs to be placed on the correct side of this divide. Once that divide is respected, debt stops being confusing. It becomes predictable. And predictability is the foundation of control. Chapter 5. Why the wealthy design cash flow. Before they borrow, most people approach debt from the outside in. They start with access. They ask what they qualify for. They want to know how much they can borrow. Approval feels like progress. Limits feel like opportunity. But the wealthy begin from a very different place. They start from the inside out. Before borrowing a single dollar, they focus on one question that almost no one else asks. What will repay this loan if I step away? This question changes everything. It shifts attention away from income and towards structure. Most people rely on themselves to service debt, their job, their effort, their availability. As long as they are present and productive, the system works. But this is not leverage. It is dependency. The wealthy avoid this trap deliberately. They understand that debt tied directly to personal effort creates fragility. Illness, burnout, market shifts, or even simple fatigue can turn manageable obligations into pressure. So instead of asking whether they can handle the payments, they ask whether the system can. Cash flow is designed first, not imagined, not projected optimistically. Designed. Only after that design exists does debt enter the conversation. This order is critical, because debt does not create cash flow. It only interacts with it. If cash flow is inconsistent, debt amplifies instability. If cash flow is predictable, debt becomes manageable. The wealthy are not obsessed with borrowing. They are obsessed with reliability. They want systems that behave the same way, regardless of mood, motivation, or energy. Systems that continue operating even when attention is elsewhere. This is why many people misinterpret wealth. From the outside, it looks like confidence, like risk tolerance, like boldness. But internally, it is caution expressed through design. Borrowing is delayed until cash flow proves itself. Not once, repeatedly. Because one good month means nothing. Consistency is what matters. This is also why the wealthy often appear slow to act. They are not reacting to opportunity. They are validating structure. They know that speed introduced too early creates irreversible mistakes. Debt added to untested cash flow creates pressure before resilience. So they wait. They let the system show its behavior. They observe how it responds to stress. They test margins quietly. Only when the system demonstrates stability does leverage become useful. At that point, debt no longer feels dramatic. It does not create excitement. It does not feel like a leap. It feels administrative. Because the risk has already been addressed. Most people never experience this feeling. They borrow first and hope cash flow appears later. They depend on improvement, on growth, on things going right. The wealthy depend on proof. This difference explains why two people can use similar loans and experience completely different stress levels. One wakes up thinking about payments. The other barely notices them, not because the amount is smaller, but because responsibility has been transferred from the individual to the system. Debt becomes dangerous when it demands constant attention. It becomes manageable when it fades into the background. This is not accidental, it is designed. The wealthy understand that the goal of borrowing is not access to money. It is reduction of personal exposure. When debt increases dependence on effort, it is rejected. When debt reduces dependence on effort, it is considered. This is the quiet filter most people never apply. They ask whether borrowing will help them grow. The wealthy ask whether borrowing will allow them to step back. Because true leverage does not make you busier, it makes you less necessary. In the next chapter, we will examine why speed is the enemy of this process and why patience, not urgency, is the real advantage when debt is involved. That distinction is where most people fail to wait and pay the price for it. What most people misunderstand about cash flow is that they treat it as a result, something that appears after decisions are made, after borrowing happens, after growth begins. The wealthy treat cash flow as a requirement, not a hope, not a projection, a condition. Before debt is introduced, cash flow must already exist in a reliable form, not because debt cannot function without it, but because debt exposes whatever cash flow touches. If cash flow is irregular, debt amplifies instability. If cash flow is predictable, debt becomes manageable. This is why the wealthy spend so much time observing cash flow before acting. They do not ask whether something can grow. They ask whether it behaves consistently. Growth can hide weakness. Consistency reveals it. A system that performs well once proves nothing. A system that performs acceptably across time, across conditions, and across minor disruptions demonstrates reliability. Only this type of reliability is compatible with debt. Most people skip this step. They borrow based on expectations, on forecasts, on optimism. They assume improvement will arrive in time. The wealthy assume nothing. They require evidence. This is also why they are comfortable saying no to opportunities that look attractive. If cash flow has not proven itself, debt is not allowed to enter, no matter how compelling the upside appears. This discipline is invisible from the outside. It looks like hesitation, like missed chances, but internally, it is risk management at work. The wealthy understand that borrowing locks in assumptions, and assumptions that have not been tested become liabilities once debt is involved. Cash flow designed before borrowing does not need to be impressive. It needs to be repeatable. Small, predictable streams are valued more highly than large, volatile ones, because volatility requires attention, and attention reintroduces dependence. The goal is not maximum return. The goal is minimum fragility. When cash flow exists independently of effort, debt no longer feels personal. It becomes operational. This separation is critical. Debt that depends on personal performance creates stress. Debt that depends on systems creates distance. Distance reduces emotional involvement. Emotional distance improves judgment. This is why the wealthy can think clearly, even when debt is present. Their identity is not attached to outcomes. Their effort is not tied to survival. Cash flow absorbs pressure quietly, and once this absorption is proven, debt becomes a technical decision, not a psychological one. This order, cash flow first, debt second, is rarely taught, because it feels slow, but it is the only order that prevents debt from becoming a threat. When cash flow is designed first, borrowing does not change behavior. It simply extends capacity, and extension without behavioral change is the safest form of leverage. Chapter 6. Speed is the enemy. Structure is the advantage. Speed feels powerful. It creates the sensation of progress. It convinces people they are moving forward, even when direction is unclear. When debt is involved, Speed becomes especially seductive. Borrowing creates instant movement. Things happen quickly. Decisions feel decisive. And for a brief moment, it feels like control. But speed has a cost that most people don't see until it's too late. Debt compresses time. It pulls future obligations into the present and demands that everything works sooner than it should. When people rush, they remove the space required for mistakes. They eliminate room for learning. They trade resilience for momentum. The wealthy understand this instinctively. They are not impressed by speed. They are cautious of it. Because speed magnifies flaws before they can be corrected. A weak system can survive slowly. It cannot survive quickly. This is why debt combined with urgency is one of the most common paths to collapse. People borrow because they feel behind. They borrow because they want to catch up. They borrow because waiting feels unbearable. But debt does not reward urgency. It punishes it. Speed forces decisions before clarity arrives. It locks people into commitments before systems have proven themselves. And once debt is added, reversing course becomes expensive. The wealthy do the opposite. They slow down on purpose. They allow time to reveal weaknesses. They let patterns repeat before they scale them. They observe behavior across cycles, not moments. This patience is not passive. It is deliberate. Structure takes time to reveal itself. Cash flow needs repetition. Processes need stress. Margins need testing. Speed skips these steps. Structure depends on them. When debt is added too early, it freezes bad assumptions into reality. When debt is added after structure is proven, it reinforces what already works. This is the difference most people miss. They assume debt creates opportunity. In reality, it locks in whatever already exists. If what exists is fragile, debt accelerates failure. If what exists is stable, debt accelerates reliability. The wealthy wait because they know time is the filter that exposes truth. A system that survives slowly can survive with leverage. A system that only works under perfect conditions will not survive pressure. Speed removes the ability to observe. Structure depends on observation. This is why those who move the fastest often experience the most stress. They are constantly reacting, constantly adjusting, constantly repairing. Debt turns these reactions into obligations. Every decision matters more. Every mistake costs more. Every delay creates pressure. Structure reduces this intensity. It allows decisions to be made calmly. It creates buffers that absorb shock. It makes outcomes predictable. The wealthy are not avoiding opportunity. They are avoiding fragility. They know that patience is not about waiting for the right moment. It is about allowing systems to demonstrate their behavior over time. Debt introduced after this process feels different. It does not demand speed. It does not create urgency. It does not dominate attention. It supports what already exists. This is why structure is the real advantage. Not intelligence, not access, not confidence. Structure. Speed feels exciting. Structure feels boring. But boring systems survive. And survival is the foundation of wealth. In the next chapter, we will look at how debt quietly builds wealth over time when it is used without urgency, without attention, and without drama. That quiet process is where most people stop looking and miss everything. Speed creates urgency. Urgency creates mistakes. This sequence is predictable, yet most people underestimate its power. When debt enters a situation, it compresses time. Decisions that could have waited now feel immediate. Options that could have been explored now feel closed. Speed removes choice, and without choice, structure collapses. The wealthy are acutely aware of this. They do not avoid speed because they lack ambition. They avoid it because they understand its cost. Speed reduces the ability to observe. Observation is where weakness reveals itself. A system that operates slowly exposes flaws gently. A system pushed to move quickly breaks before flaws can be corrected. Debt accelerates this process. It does not allow for adjustment. It locks behavior into place. This is why the wealthy deliberately slow down when debt is involved. They widen timelines. They delay scaling. They resist momentum. Not because they fear growth, but because they respect structure. Structure cannot be rushed. Margins need time to prove themselves. Processes need repetition. Assumptions need stress. Speed eliminates these tests. It replaces validation with belief. Belief is fragile. Structure is not. This is also why many people feel exhausted when using debt. They are constantly maintaining pace, always responding, always correcting, always repairing. Debt, combined with speed, creates permanent urgency. Urgency shortens perspective. Shortened perspective leads to short-term decisions, and short-term decisions accumulate quietly. The wealthy choose the opposite approach. They allow boredom. They let systems run without interference. They resist the urge to optimize constantly, because optimization introduces fragility when structure is still forming. Speed feels productive. Structure feels slow. But slow systems survive disruption. Fast systems collapse under pressure. Debt amplifies whichever path is chosen. Speed plus debt creates stress. Structure plus debt creates stability. This is not theoretical. It is observable across cycles. Those who moved fastest are often the first to fail. Those who built patiently are often the last standing. The advantage of structure is not visible in the beginning. It becomes obvious only after time passes, and time always exposes which decisions were made with patience and which were made with urgency. Debt rewards the former. It punishes the latter. This is why speed, despite its appeal, is the enemy. And structure, despite its boredom, is the advantage. Because in the presence of debt, only what is built to last is allowed to remain. Chapter 7. How Debt Quietly Builds Wealth Over Time. Most people imagine wealth as something visible. They expect movement, signals, clear signs of progress. They assume that if debt is working, it should feel active, busy, noticeable. But the way debt quietly builds wealth looks nothing like that. When debt is used correctly, it fades into the background. It does not demand attention. It does not create tension. It does not dominate daily decisions. It becomes part of the environment, not the focus. This is why most people miss it. Quiet systems are easy to overlook. There is no drama, no urgency, no emotional swings. Payments occur on schedule. Cash flow behaves predictably. Nothing feels fragile. And because nothing feels fragile, nothing feels impressive. But this is precisely the point. Wealth does not require excitement. It requires endurance. Debt that supports endurance is fundamentally different from debt that creates pressure. In quiet systems, debt is not used to accelerate change. It is used to stabilize it. Time becomes the primary advantage. Not time spent working harder, but time allowed to pass without interference. When systems are allowed to operate uninterrupted, small advantages compound. Margins widen slowly. Buffers grow quietly. Dependence on effort decreases almost unnoticed. This is why people often underestimate how wealth is actually built. They look for turning points, for bold decisions, for moments where everything changed. But most of the time, nothing dramatic happens. Things simply continue, and continuation is powerful. Debt used quietly does not chase opportunity. It supports consistency. It is not used to expand aggressively. It is used to reinforce what already works. This is why the wealthy rarely talk about it. There is nothing to explain, nothing to sell, nothing to celebrate publicly. The system does its job whether anyone is watching or not. Contrast this with debt that creates noise. When debt demands attention, people feel it constantly. They think about payments, They worry about timing. They react to every fluctuation. That kind of debt dominates mental space. And what dominates attention limits long-term thinking. Quiet debt does the opposite. It frees attention. When obligations are predictable, decisions can be made calmly. When pressure is low, patience becomes possible, and patience allows time to do its work. This is where compounding actually occurs. Not through aggressive growth, but through uninterrupted operation. Debt that quietly supports systems does not increase lifestyle. It increases stability. It does not create the appearance of wealth. It creates the conditions for it. Most people never experience this because they associate debt with change. They expect it to transform their situation quickly. But transformation is not the goal. Durability is. Quiet debt does not ask, "How fast can this grow?" It asks, "How long can this last?" That single shift changes everything. When the focus moves from speed to longevity, decisions slow down. Risk tolerance decreases. Design improves. Debt becomes conservative, even when growth continues. This is why wealth built this way often looks unimpressive from the outside. There are no sudden upgrades, no dramatic milestones. But inside the system, resilience is increasing. Over time, the gap widens between those who chase momentum and those who protect continuity. One group is always reacting, the other is simply letting time pass, and time favors the latter. Debt that quietly builds wealth does not announce itself. It does not need validation. It does not rely on timing. It simply exists within structure and allows compounding to occur naturally. This is why the most powerful use of debt often feels uneventful. Nothing breaks. Nothing accelerates wildly. Nothing draws attention. But year after year, the system becomes harder to disrupt. And when disruption arrives elsewhere, these systems remain. That quiet persistence is what most people mistake for luck. In the final chapter, we will look at the moment when debt stops being dangerous altogether. Not because it disappears, but because it no longer has the power to destabilize the system it supports. That shift is the final transition. What makes this quiet process so difficult to accept is that it offers very little emotional feedback. There is no sense of winning, no clear moment of breakthrough, no signal that confirms you are doing it right. Most people are conditioned to respond to feedback, praise, results, visible change. Quiet systems provide none of that. They operate below the surface, where progress cannot be felt day to day. This absence of feedback is exactly why so many people abandon stability in favor of movement. They mistake silence for stagnation. But silence is often a sign that friction has been removed. When debt is structured correctly, it removes friction instead of adding it. There are fewer urgent decisions, fewer emotional responses, fewer moments that require intervention. Nothing demands to be fixed because nothing is breaking, and this creates a strange psychological challenge. People begin to doubt what isn't demanding attention. They wonder if they should be doing more. They feel tempted to optimize, adjust, accelerate. This impulse is dangerous. Because quiet systems are fragile only when they are interfered with. The wealthy learn to resist this impulse. They understand that boredom is not a signal to change course. It is a signal that the system is working. Debt, when placed inside a stable structure, becomes almost invisible. It blends into the background like infrastructure. You don't think about electricity when the lights stay on. You don't think about plumbing when water flows consistently. You only notice systems when they fail. Quiet debt works the same way. Its success is measured by the absence of stress, by the lack of urgency, by the freedom to think long-term without pressure. This is why people who build wealth this way often appear unambitious. They are not chasing expansion. They are protecting continuity. Their focus is not growth at all costs. It is survival across cycles. They understand that markets change, Income fluctuates, opportunities come and go, but systems that are designed to endure can absorb these shifts. Debt that supports endurance does not compete with time. It aligns with it, and alignment with time is where compounding truly lives. Compounding is not dramatic. It does not feel powerful in the moment. It feels repetitive. The same actions, the same payments, the same rhythms. Over long periods, these rhythms create asymmetry. Small advantages accumulate quietly while others reset repeatedly. Most people never notice this gap forming because it widens slowly, but once it exists, it becomes very difficult to close. This is why quiet wealth often looks inevitable in hindsight. Not because it was obvious at the beginning, but because nothing interrupted it. Debt, when used this way, is not the engine, it is the support beam. It holds systems steady while time does the work, and when time is allowed to work uninterrupted, wealth stops feeling like something that must be forced. It becomes something that simply unfolds. That unfolding is invisible to those watching closely for excitement, but to those who understand structure, it is unmistakable, because nothing grows quietly by accident. Chapter 8. When debt stops being dangerous. There is a moment when debt changes its nature. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but decisively. It is the moment when debt no longer has the power to destabilize your life. This moment does not arrive because the balance reaches zero, and it does not arrive because income becomes high. It arrives when dependency disappears. For most people, debt feels dangerous because it controls their choices. They feel watched by it, pressured by it, forced to prioritize it above everything else. Decisions shrink, time compresses, options narrow. Debt becomes something to manage constantly because it demands attention to survive. When debt reaches this state, it is no longer a tool. It is a condition. But this is not the only way debt can exist. There is another state that most people never experience. A state where debt no longer dictates behavior, where it no longer accelerates stress, where it no longer forces urgency into every decision. In this state, debt is still present, but it is no longer dangerous. The difference lies in control. Danger exists wherever debt depends on you, your effort, your presence, your continued performance. As long as debt requires you to show up perfectly, it holds power. But when that dependency is removed, something shifts. Debt stops being personal. It becomes structural. This is the moment when the relationship changes. The system, not the individual, becomes responsible. Cash flow replaces effort. Predictability replaces hope. Buffers replace optimism. Debt no longer asks, "Can you handle this?" It asks, "Can the system absorb this?" And systems, unlike people, do not get tired. They do not panic. They do not second guess. They either work or they don't. This clarity is what removes danger. Most people assume debt becomes safe when the numbers look comfortable. Lower payments, higher income, more savings. But these are illusions. Comfort based on personal capacity is fragile. Illness, market shifts, or simple burnout can dismantle it quickly. True safety does not come from capacity. It comes from independence. Debt stops being dangerous when its survival no longer depends on how hard you work or how well things go. This is why some people carry debt calmly while others are consumed by it. The difference is not courage, it is exposure. When debt exposure is personal, fear is rationale. When exposure is structural, fear fades, because structure does not feel fear. Structure either holds or it breaks. And when it is designed correctly, it holds. This transition rarely feels exciting. In fact, it often feels anticlimactic. There is no moment of triumph, no sense of having figured it out. Debt simply stops occupying mental space. It stops being part of daily thought. It stops influencing emotional decisions. It fades into the background, and that disappearance is the signal. When debt no longer commands attention, it no longer commands power. This is also when many people feel uneasy, because they are accustomed to tension. They are used to pressure as proof that something important is happening. When pressure disappears, they mistake calm for vulnerability. They wonder if they are missing something. But calm is not the absence of risk. It is the presence of control. The wealthy recognize this difference. They do not seek the absence of debt. They seek the absence of dependency. They understand that eliminating debt entirely is not the same as eliminating risk. In many cases, it simply shifts risk elsewhere. The real objective is stability across conditions. Debt that is embedded within resilient systems does not amplify chaos. It dampens it. It absorbs shock instead of transmitting it. This is why, at a certain point, debt becomes almost irrelevant. Not because it disappears, but because it no longer changes behavior. Decisions are made based on long-term logic, not short-term obligation. Opportunities are evaluated calmly, not desperately. Time horizons expand. This expansion of time is the final gift of properly structured debt. When urgency disappears, thinking changes. People stop asking, "What do I need to do next?" They begin asking, "What can I allow to continue?" This is a profound shift, because wealth is not built through constant intervention. It is built through systems that continue working without being touched. Debt that reaches this stage is no longer a threat. It is infrastructure. Like a bridge you cross without thinking, like power lines you never notice. Its purpose is not to impress, it is to function. Most people never experience this because they focus on eliminating debt instead of eliminating fragility. They race towards zero balances while remaining exposed in every other way. When the next disruption arrives, they are forced to react again. The cycle repeats. But when fragility is removed, even debt loses its teeth. It no longer defines success or failure. It no longer accelerates mistakes. It no longer dictates pace. It simply exists within a design that anticipates reality. This is the point where debt stops being emotional. It is no longer feared, and it is no longer admired. It is respected. Respected for what it can do, and constrained by where it is allowed to operate. At this level, there is no temptation to overuse it. There is no urgency to expand. Because the goal is no longer growth. The goal is continuity. Continuity across time, across cycles, across uncertainty. Debt that supports continuity is fundamentally different from debt that chases progress. One survives quietly, the other collapses loudly. When debt stops being dangerous, life becomes less reactive. Decisions feel slower, but clearer. Pressure fades, perspective expands, and wealth begins to feel less like something pursued and more like something maintained. This is the final transition. Not from debt to freedom, but from fragility to resilience, from dependence to design, from constant management to quiet stability. Debt does not need to disappear for this to happen. It only needs to be placed where it no longer has the power to disrupt the system it supports. When that happens, debt becomes what it always should have been: neutral, predictable, contained. And once contained, it no longer defines your future. It simply supports it. Debt has never been the enemy. And it was never the solution either. What this audiobook has shown, layer by layer, is that debt is simply a force, neutral, precise, unemotional. It does not reward good intentions, it does not punish bad luck, and it does not respond to confidence, fear, or hope. It responds only to structure. This is why debt appears so inconsistent in people's lives, why it seems to lift some quietly over decades, while breaking others suddenly and completely. The difference was never intelligence, it was never effort, and it was never timing. It was design. Most people spend their lives reacting to money, reacting to bills, reacting to opportunity, reacting to pressure. Debt magnifies this reactivity. When debt enters a reactive life, it accelerates stress. It compresses time. It forces decisions before clarity arrives. And so debt earns its reputation as something dangerous. But danger was never inherent in the tool. Danger came from fragility. Throughout this audiobook, one pattern repeats itself. Whenever debt depended on the individual, on their energy, their consistency, their ability to keep pushing forward, it created pressure. Whenever debt was placed inside a system, inside predictable cash flow, inside structure designed to absorb reality, it became calm, almost invisible. This is the dividing line that matters. Not debt versus no debt, but dependency versus design. The wealthy do not seek to eliminate debt. They seek to eliminate fragility. They understand something that is rarely said out loud. A life that requires constant personal effort to remain stable is already fragile, with or without debt. Debt simply reveals this fragility faster. This is why so much advice around money feels incomplete. It tells people what to avoid, what to fear, what not to do, but it rarely teaches what to build. Structure is not exciting. It does not create stories worth bragging about. It does not deliver quick validation. Structure is repetitive, quiet, often boring. But it survives, and survival is what allows time to work. Time is the most underestimated factor in wealth. Not because people don't value it, but because they keep interrupting it. They rush, they optimize too early, they chase momentum. Debt, when combined with these behaviors, does exactly what it is supposed to do. It amplifies them. This is why slowing down is not weakness. It is preparation. Why patience is not hesitation. It is risk management. Why waiting for systems to prove themselves is not missed opportunity, but avoided collapse. When debt is placed correctly, something subtle happens. It stops being emotional. It no longer represents risk or reward. It no longer defines success or failure. It becomes infrastructure. And infrastructure is meant to be ignored. You don't think about bridges when they work. You don't think about power lines when lights stay on. You only notice systems when they fail. The goal is not to feel clever. It is to feel unbothered. This is the state where debt stops being dangerous. Not because it disappears, but because it no longer has leverage over your decisions. When urgency fades, perspective expands. When pressure disappears, clarity improves. When debt no longer demands attention, life becomes less reactive. This is the real outcome most people are searching for, even if they don't realize it. Not wealth as display, but wealth as stability. Not growth as acceleration, but growth as continuity. Not freedom from responsibility, but freedom from fragility. Debt, when understood and constrained by structure, does not need to be feared, and it does not deserve admiration. It deserves respect. Respect for its ability to expose weakness. Respect for its inability to forgive disorder. Respect for the rules it follows without exception. Those rules are always present, whether acknowledged or ignored. And once seen clearly, they cannot be unseen. From this point forward, debt no longer has to be a mystery. It does not need to be avoided blindly, and it does not need to be embraced recklessly. It simply needs to be placed where it cannot destabilize what matters. When that happens, wealth stops feeling fragile, and the future stops feeling urgent. Not because risk is gone, but because design has replaced dependence. That is the real shift. And once it happens, everything else becomes quieter, predictable, manageable, and for the first time, truly under control.